Okay, I'm going to give a kind of a quick thing here on this question. It's a pretty somewhat complex question, but it's actually quite precise what this is asking you to do. So that might be a good thing to think about in terms of whether this is a good choice, is if you feel like you've got a pretty good idea of the precise kind of target and attack that is involved here. So I say that in part because I'm not going to rehearse Goldman's whole theory and the Gettier whole problem. You give a little bit of ideas there, but mostly kind of suggest how I'm seeing that these things would be lined up and kind of how they would engage each other in this question. So here I say explain Goldman's reliabilist theory of knowledge and consider how it would provide a response to the Gettier problem. That's pretty much the core of the question right there. So for Goldman's reliabilist theory of knowledge, it's mostly really a theory of justification, but that justification being that component of knowledge. Um, so we've got the Goldman reading in our text, and we discussed this a bit in class. So you want to look at your class notes there, and that reading from Goldman. You also here, you might want to go look online, maybe the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and give a look to reliabilism. You'll probably see like way more than you need, but just get the basic idea of process reliabilism. So we kind of are worrying about here. There's lots of versions of it by now. Um, so you want to be able to make sure that you can give an account, an explanation of what Goldman means by saying that a justified belief must be the product of a reliable belief forming process. You want to be able to explain that. And basically the reliable belief forming process is a method of forming a belief which, over the long haul, reliably produces true ones. Like maybe the scientific method is a reliable belief forming process. Other things about kind of common sense might give us some kind of reliable ways of forming our beliefs. Important that you can be able to kind of specify the theoretical definite requirement here for reliability. Um, but also give us some explanation for why that gives a good reason to think that a belief is justified if it's something that came from a reliable belief forming process in the sense that Goldman means by reliability. In his sense of reliability, if a particular belief is known to result from a belief forming process that usually forms true ones, then we have good reason to think that that's a true one. Really, any belief that comes from that process, we have good reason to think is true if it really is a process that more often than not results in true beliefs. So that's the kind of basic idea of why that would be a sensible way to define justification. It actually does give us good reason to think that a belief is true if we can show that it was reliably formed. So this would appear to provide a response to the Gettier problem. I'm going to say this kind of quickly. You'll have to know the Gettier problem on its own in a way. Would be this: in the cases that Gettier describes, those people are not using reliable belief forming methods to arrive at their true beliefs. They got true beliefs because of luck, not because the way that they were thinking is a reliable way that would usually get us to the truth. In fact, it looks like it usually wouldn't, because usually we wouldn't have those kinds of lucky coincidences that make us end up with a true belief. So if we were to run that way of forming beliefs like across a whole bunch of circumstances, not just the Gettier circumstance, it looks like they were using unreliable processes. So If that's the case, then it would follow that the belief that the Gettier people have isn't justified. So if it's not justified, then the Gettier case falls apart. It only works when we can assume that the people in the example have justified true beliefs but don't have knowledge. Goldman would say, well, if their belief forming processes aren't reliable, then I agree that they don't have knowledge. But that means that's not a problem from my view, because I, in essence, get the right answer. On my view, they don't have knowledge, and that's the right thing to say. The worry was that the justified true belief tradition, which defines justification not as reliability, but rather as kind of basing on adequate evidence, they say that the person has justified true belief, and they therefore have to say that they have knowledge. But Goldman's theory of justification isn't satisfied by those Gettier examples, and he says this is the better theory of justification to be using. So, on my view, I'm not subject to these Gettier problems. So that's speaks in his favor. So it turns out that there are kind of new and improved Gettier type problems that can be raised against reliabilism. Subsequent philosophers have come up with some pretty good cases that make it look like, without a little bit of addition, maybe Goldman's theory won't quite be able to get around all cases of epistemic luck, since that's the kind of main thing that the Gettier problem shows is epistemic luck. So may not turn out to be that as successful as Goldman thinks. So another kind of thing is you might look up, you can even look up on maybe Stanford Encyclopedia some objections to reliabilism. Another objection is this: you could have something like a reliable toaster or like a vending machine that's reliable. And in a way, he's saying that a justified belief of a human thinker really isn't much different from them functioning like a reliable toaster, that instead of like reliably making toast, we reliably produce true beliefs. Um, but he doesn't describe people that have justification in that way, in this kind of toaster-like way, we might say, or machine-like way, as having grounds and reasons for their beliefs in the way that a lot of people think is necessary to see somebody as rational, or for having a good reason for their belief. And you need to have that if you've got knowledge. You've got to have a good reason to hold your belief. And Goldman kind of famously says, no, you don't. You just have to be using a method that's reliable, that might or might not involve a process that involves having reasons. If you think about it, it might not. But for Goldman, so long as it's reliable, that's all that matters. So that's kind of a weird theory of justification that could allow us to have it, justification, even if it doesn't require that we like have reasons for what we believe. Isn't that a kind of a weird theory of justification? So there's a whole school of epistemologists called internalists about justification, who think that Goldman's approach is sorely misguided. So that kind of is enough to maybe get you into the fray there. Goldman's got his own critics to respond to. Maybe he doesn't do the Gettier problem. Another problem for Goldman is this thing called the value problem. Also this thing called the generality problem. So you can take a look at kind of research. We talked about some of these in class. You could research a little bit these. There's a kind of whole slew of problems: Gettier problem, value problem, generality problem, that are in the mix in deciding how adequately Goldman has answered Gettier. All right, enjoy.